my goodness, to be alive. Welcome to the Chicken Box. I am your host, Impeccable, along with my co host, Jay Jackson and Dr. Draper. How are you feeling?
Good
I
morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm feeling great. It's another
Excellent.
day, as my mother used to say, I didn't know what she meant. She used to say, it's another day above ground. Was another day above ground.
That's it. Jay?
I'm doing great. All things are good here, considering hurricanes and everything else. So it's excellent.
Great and grateful. Yeah, our prayers are for all of the families that may be affected, those who are traveling, who have gotten away, or just in a situation that is uncomfortable right now. We pray that it will be comfortable very, very soon. Well, this is the Chicken Box, and it is Thursday. Yes, one of my favorite days of the. Everybody used to say, "Well, what day do you like?" I said, "Every day that ends in Y." So you can like every day. You just got to wake up and be grateful and happy. We got a good show. We got a great show today. Jay, I know it seems like this is personal to your heart, so I'm actually gonna just bounce it over to you. Let you kick off the show today. Matter of fact, I'm sorry. I didn't even tell you. This is the Chicken Box. If you're not from the Baltimore area, the Chicken Box in Baltimore is 4 wings, fries, salt, pepper, ketchup. It gets greasy, it gets good, and it's one of the staples, especially if you add a half and half, half lemonade and half sweet tea. But here, powered by the 130-year-old Afro-American newspaper, the Chicken Box is where you come speak your truth. Get this part. We don't have to agree with you. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And we're not going to get angry if we don't agree with each other. But we have a special guest coming in. I want Jay to do the intros, and so we can get right into, today's show.
All right. Today we're going to talk with Lady Brion, the 11th Maryland Poet Laureate. Look, I don't know if we have enough time to go down her entire resume, but I'll try. Lady Brion is an international spoken word artist, curator, activist, organizer, educator, and executive director of the Pennsylvania Avenue Black Arts and Entertainment District. She is the winner of the 2016 National Poetry Slam, 2017-2019 Southern Friar Regional Slam, 2019 Rustbelt Regional Slam. She's also on the board of DewMore Baltimore and is the cultural curator for A Beautiful Struggle in Baltimore, to say the least. Welcome, Lady Brion.
Thank you. How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Glad to have you.
We are feeling her. He was just slamming, wasn't it? And of this slam, of that slam, I got hungry. What was the old thing at Denny's? The Grand Slam was
A little bit of everything.
She was slamming. Lady Brion is with us. We need to get those horns and go. Burr, 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 burr. We need to add that to the show with some sound effects. But man, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's just start out. What is a slam?
What is a slam? Okay. So a slam is a competition for spoken word poets, right? And so it has time limits. Sometimes it has themes. You always have 5 judges who are typically picked from the audience, and they choose who are the winners of that slam. And so it was really created as a trick to make people in the United States interested in listening to poetry. So you add competition to it, and all of a sudden poetry becomes cool. So it was a way just to get people to listen to poetry. And there have been national organizations, regional organizations who have made it their work to produce poetry slam competitions across the United States and now globally. So it's a big deal. Yeah.
If you haven't been to a slam, where do we go to look for slams? Is it websites? Is it a poetry like hangout online or?
Yeah, there used to be a national organization that put on all the major poetry slams. But since COVID, they have, a little bit before COVID, but they closed their doors. So now there's all these like independent organizations that do poetry slams. Busboys and Poets has a slam that they do both. There's 2 different locations that do slams in this region. The 11th Hour Slam that happens on Fridays. And then there's a new slam that just popped up that happens in Anacostia in DC. But yeah, if you Google poetry slams, there are many that will pop up all across the United States. We used to host one here in Baltimore for the last 3 years called the Women of the World Poetry Slam. So that was one that I hosted under the Black Arts District. So there are many, but you kind of got to do a little digging because there's no repository of slams anymore.
Right. Fair enough. I do want to just quickly just congratulate you very directly about becoming the Poet Laureate for Maryland. I think that's kind of amazing. And you are the 11th. We did a write-up at the Afro about you receiving that, being honored by DewMore, the First Lady of Maryland, which I would we'll try to put it up in the chat so people can see the link for that. So my first thing is, can you give the audience a bit of sort of background for yourself? I gave what's on your website, but I think you can speak to it a little bit better than I can. How did you find yourself getting into poetry and making your way all the way to this prestigious award?
Yeah.
Position, I should say.
So I'm a Baltimore girl through and through, born and raised here in the city. And I have been writing and performing for over 20 years at this point. I started when I was really young in middle school. And I remember watching a show called Def Poetry Jam on HBO. And I just fell in love with artists like Sonny Patterson and Saul Williams. And I just wanted to find my space in the poetry community. Like I just really wanted to, at some point in my life, be on a stage like Def Poetry Jam. And so I started writing, and, you know, I grew up in the church and I was also a debater in school. And so these were spaces where the adults around me cultivated times and places for me to actually be able to perform my poetry in front of live audiences. And so I think from out the gate, I really was more of a performance poet than I was a page poet, because I had all these places where I could perform, whether it was in church, whether it was cafeterias at the school, whether it was at youth festivals, etc. And so I really got my footing early on. And I definitely blossomed once I went to Howard University, where I was just all in through the art scene in DC and at Howard. And I think I just kind of decided that that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be an artist for a living. And then, like I said, I was also a policy debater. And so my coach, Daryl Birch, really helped me to understand the intersection or the cross points with advocacy and art, and using art as a way to persuade, as a way to motivate, as a way to mobilize people, and not just art for art's sake. And so I've you know, often called myself an artivist, right? Really thinking about how art and activism interplay. And that's really been a part of my work. That's how I became a member of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, serving as their cultural curator. Work that you see me do with rallies or organizing efforts. It's how I, you know, moved to be the executive director of the Black Arts District. So it's all been this intersection of like art and activism, and how do we make the world better using the art that we love. And then ultimately, because of this intersection of art and activism, I also often find myself performing in a lot of political spaces.
Right.
And so, you know, I was asked to do, for example, the inauguration of our first elected woman comptroller, which is Brooke Learman. I also did the inauguration for our illustrious governor, Governor Moore. And so it was sort of in all these different spaces that I found myself. I really, you know, wanted to hold the space as Poet Laureate. But honestly, I learned about what a Poet Laureate was when I first learned about Lucille Clifton, who served as the first Black woman to be Poet Laureate in the state of Maryland. And so that's been a dream on a vision board for a really long time. And I think, you know, learning about Wes Moore and, you know, him being elected, it was the first time that it seemed like a viable opportunity for me. And so I went after it.
Poet Laureate.
Yeah.
For those who just tuned in, we have Lady Brion, Maryland's 11th Poet Laureate. If you've never heard the word before, you probably, you know, I know if you haven't heard poet, I think you got to go back to the nursery school at least, and you'll find out about that. But laureate, what actually does it goes into winning this prestigious award?
Yeah, you know, honestly, it's an application process, honestly. So poets from across the state apply, and you're vetted based on your merit, accolades, published work, etc. You know, I was really excited to find that this go round they started to incorporate other points on the rubric to decide who might hold this seat, because oftentimes performance poetry is not a part of the conversation, right? So it's really about your published work. It's not about slam accolades or how many competitions you've won or videos or albums, right? It's usually about the published work because poetry, right? But we understand that poetry expands beyond just the written work on page. And so I'm so grateful that the committee that was put together to select me as Poet Laureate was expansive enough to include other areas of merit for a literary artist such as myself. But yeah, it's an application process. There's a committee that's put together. That committee vets those applicants, and then a recommendation is made to the commissioners at the Maryland State Arts Council. And ultimately, once they select their, I guess, top individual or top two individuals, is then given to the Office of Appointments under the governor, and they select who will actually hold the seat for the term of the governor.
Oh, so it's for the term of the governor. That was my next question.
Yep.
Dr. Draper.
Wow. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of it, right? Your poet, you have this activism piece, very, very strong. In fact, I think when I first met you, it was you were doing you still always do your activism. What would you say to a young person who said, you know what, I love poetry, and I want to do something with that? Where would you suggest that they start? And how young were you when you started? What was your journey like?
Yeah. So again, I was in middle school, and for me, it was just the experience of seeing other powerful poets on screen that really inspired me to want to explore my own voice and what it felt like to put my own truth on page. And so I think for young aspiring poets, I think what I would say is, one, go and experience it, right? I want you to read it. I want you to go to some open mics. I want you to hear it. I want you to see it embodied, right? And then just think about your own truth. What do you want to say? What is important for the world to hear from you? Because we all have stories. We all have a message that is necessary, right? Necessary for other people to hear, necessary for other people to connect. And I would just encourage them to try it out, try it on, see how it feels, and get on a stage somewhere, right? Because I'm all about not just poetry on page, but also poetry on stage. So where might you go and recite it, whether it is in your school, whether it is for your family, whether it is in your community, like find a space to really explore your voice out loud in the creative space and see how it feels.
Well, I love that. Not just poet on page, but poet on stage.
Indeed.
Were you always comfortable on stage, even as a middle schooler?
I was raised in the church. So it was like when it was Youth Sunday, it's like, okay, Brion, you're gonna lead the service this morning. I was on the choir. My mom was a choir director. So I was just used to kind of being, and I have a really big personality, right? I'm an introvert, but I got an extroverted personality. So I've always sort of been out loud, very much so, very boisterous girl. So that part I was never scared of. That wasn't the daunting part, getting on stage, because that's kind of always been a part of my childhood. And again, that was my connection point. Like, I didn't read poetry like out of a book and say I wanted to be a poet. No, I saw these big, high energy poets on my TV screen, and that is what connected me. That was the point of relevance. Like, oh, we can do this with poetry. Oh, I'm sold. So it was a stage thing for me.
So you're like any other artist, R&B artist, because they're just poetry to music, and then and hip hop artists, right?
Indeed, yeah.
That's the same. I wouldn't say poetic justice, but poetic art.
Yeah, we always say we're cousins. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I heard you flow. I mean, like, we're gonna show in a minute with a video of you, and I mean, that video brought chills, and it was just 2 minutes. But I mean, when I talk about rock the mic, you rocked. You rocked the mic. All right, I'm gonna tee it up, Jay. You got any questions?
Yeah. Why don't you play this, and then we'll come back and I'll ask my next question.
All right.
I have been folding my tongue beneath itself, bleaching my language, clenching my jaw with shackled teeth because the moment.
Yeah, we can't hear that.
We can't hear it.
We can't hear it. I think you're muted.
White stuff down.
All right, we're gonna
my
start
windpipe,
again.
I talk
What
black.
is going on today, y'all? You know what I mean? They are trying to stop this beautiful poetic symphony of words today.
If not, Lady Brion had to just do it live on the
Yeah,
live.
no pressure.
Yeah, she always ready. She looked like she always ready. We're gonna try one more time. All right, but as we, you know, we try to use technology, share the screen. We even tested it. We said it was too loud. What happened?
I think when you muted, I think that's what muted that. I think. I don't know.
Okay. Let's try it again. Let's try it again one more time. Can you hear
I
it?
have been folding my tongue beneath itself, bleaching my language, clenching my jaw with shackled teeth because the moment I open my mouth, uprising spring from my saliva, my dialogue is cruddy. Trample with the muddy boots of trade and migration, battling nations in my diaphragm, so the rhythm in my diction sounds like a war cry, and despite the white stuff down my windpipe, I talk black with nappy phonics, syllables that kink and twist, naughty expression that beads on my palate, soul glow in this spit shine flow, Jerry curl jogging, bongo drums in my diction. This slang is semantic resistance, off with the head of the king's English. Can't you smell the riot on my breath? Char in my esophagus, my laugh is arsenic. And ain't enough opiates in this elementary education to hook me on phonics or gentrify the djembe out of my pronunciation. Love the taste of this cornbread accent. Sugar cane slang, my tongue is motherland, mama of civilization, birth of every nation, scat, boom, back, hi-hat, jazz, sax. There is music in my melanin, and I be talking hella black. With a neck roll to articulate my tone. Conversations get you high as my cheekbones, and lingo about lush as these hips done grown. Thick thighs and deep fried vernacular. Hand motions and sound effects. Hieroglyphics hidden in my messages. My breath is the building of the pyramids on repeat. I'm like a Negro spiritual sampled over a trap beat. There is a black anthem inside my belly, so I will always lift every voice and speak.
Man. Oh man.
I feel like we should have ended the show with that. That's really hard to follow up with a question.
Listen. If you didn't get any, I think my hair started to grow again or something. That was all Baltimore, all black, all. It was excellent.
Thank you.
It was powerful. It was you performed it with such passion. You can tell that you love, and that's what everybody should get up and do every day. Do what they love, and you would see that kind of reflection of art in any particular field of study that you choose to be. Now, when was this clip done? Is this
that clip was in Texas. There was a camera crew I was at a slam, and there was a camera crew that kind of follows the slams, and they just told some poets to meet them at the train station, and we were going to do a guerrilla style poetry cipher. So you hear the people in the background, they're actually sitting in a circle around me, and we're at a train station. And everybody's kind of just jumping up doing poems. And then the camera crew is kind of on the ground. That's why the angle is that way. Yeah, good times. It was, it was a poetry. I think that was a Woman of the World Poetry Slam, actually, but that was happening in Texas some years back. Yep.
Cipher.
Super dope.
A cipher, indeed. Yeah.
So you gotta, when you're in the game, you gotta know all of the lingo, huh? Slam, we're in the cipher. You just pulled up and did, was this an impromptu slam in the city?
No, this was one of those national slams. So you had people from all across the United States and beyond, right? So I think they had, I don't know, several countries represented. And so you actually have to win a slam in your city to be a representative for your city at that international slam. So I was the representative for Baltimore. And then, like I said, that cipher was sort of a pop-up midnight kind of cipher just for all the women to get together and kind of share their work. Yeah.
So I'm curious about your creative process.
Okay.
Yeah, say a little bit. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Does it? And it probably doesn't look the same all the time.
Right.
You've got a lot to remember, a lot to do. So tell us a little bit about your own personal creative process.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I like gleaning inspiration from research or text or maybe from conversations, right? So there's some impetus that kind of leads me into a new poem. Like I said, because I, think about myself as an artivist and I think about my work as a way to inform or persuade or motivate. There's something behind it. There's something that's charging that poem. And oftentimes, like I said, it's something I read, some interesting conversation or debate that I heard, or sometimes even some other kind of art form, like a song or a movie, inspires me. And I want to expand a topic matter that I saw that didn't feel like it was unpacked enough. And that kind of leads me into a poem. And so I just kind of sit with it. Sometimes poems wake me out of my sleep, 3 a.m. I wake up and there's a poem just on my heart and I start writing. But oftentimes I have to kind of set time aside and just really delve deep until I can get to the finished piece when the poem tells me it's complete. And so oftentimes, poems might just take a day, but if it's a more complex piece, it could take a week, it could take a month, it could be something that I've been editing for 6 months. So it really just depends on what that poem requires and when it says it's done. But yeah, and it's a little different. I also do commission pieces a lot. So people will come to me and they say, I want a poem about reproductive justice. And I'm like, okay, I don't have one of those. So I might interview them, I might do some research and then produce it and then we edit it together or what have you. So it kind of really depends. Is it my work or is it something that somebody is asking to be produced on their behalf?
Got it.
Yeah.
So, and let me do a follow-up question, somewhat related. With the advent of AI everywhere, including in our business and in your business, what do you think that implication might be for the work for the creative work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, AI is interesting, and I think we all are sort of grappling with this new emergence of AI technologies and how it impacts the creative space. I personally don't feel threatened because there is something that is unique and powerful and distinct about creative production that comes from human beings, that comes from lived experience, right? That just can't be created by AI. Even when you think about like visual representations of AI, there's something in the fingers. There's something,
Yeah, right.
there's something always in, like, you can always tell, like, oh, that was generated by a computer. I think the same thing is true with poetry. There is a certain uniqueness that just can't be manufactured by computers, at least not yet. So it's a beautiful thing to see what can be produced by the human experience. I would also say though that what is helpful about AI or using software to kind of generate the creative process, one thing that I'll do is use it to create a prompt that I respond to, or use it to create some really interesting out of the box like starting point and then produce the poetry from there, because sometimes we're looking for that spark, we're looking for that new thing to write about, and I think that is something that a computer or AI can be supportive with.
Great.
If you just jumped in, we are with Lady Brion,
Oh,
the poet laureate. You know, that's not a word you say every day. and especially in the Black community, the laureate. I think that might be the word of the week, everybody. Go to afro.com and check us out. We've been around for 132 years and growing. Digital has taken over the world, and we're moving right along with it. As the speed of media changes, so does the Afro. Black owned and operated for all those years. Even when they've always tried to buy us and shut us up, they can't. We're going to keep bringing on beautiful people like Lady Brion. And thank you. I'm going to thank you in advance for supporting the Afro. Go right now and get a digital subscription. It helps us bring new young reporters, videographers, editors, all the new tech team that we need. It comes from your support and from you just paying attention. Share it with somebody. If this feed just came up, just hit the little share button and subscribe. That's an easy thing. Less than 2 Uber Eats, you got a digital subscription coming right to you. And if you can't handle the 40 right now, just go to our socials and just give us a little like. I don't know why that's so important these days, but it is for the advertisers. So go ahead and give us a like so we can play in this metric game that we play in and continue to bring new and innovating programming on a regular basis. That's our story, and we will be sticking with it. Jay Jackson, come on. I know you got some poetic justice in your brain.
I do. That poem that we heard that was played, which is entitled "I Talk Black," that is clearly sort of a direct line having a conversation about sort of suppression of AAVE, right? African American Vernacular English, or Ebonics, as some people would call it, and also sort of the just suppression of Black culture in America as is, right? My question to you is, what is it about sort of the artistry of spoken word that just gravitates towards this kind of political, in this case, sort of almost grassroots political activism, right? You talk about, all of these organizations that you're involved in and stuff like that. What is it that you think poetry is just so ingrained in that sort of political activism, especially from Black folks, that it seems like when people get into poetry, you cannot help but to get there? So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on why that is, seems so common, I guess?
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote. I think this was June Jordan who said, poetry is political because it involves telling the truth, at least for Black
There
people,
you go.
right?
I like that.
And so it's just our approach to things. I don't think that we have the luxury of approaching our art form. And it really doesn't matter if you are a poet, if you're a visual artist, if you are a music artist, right? We all approach it the same way, thinking about our lived experience. When we're telling the truth and we're depicting the truth, it becomes a political space for us. It's just where we are as a people, particularly in the American context, right? And so even if I'm just telling a story about my block, about my hood, even if I'm just telling a story about how I grew up, the way in which my lived experience was or is, the way in which my community is, there are all kinds of themes that still might come out as a part of it. Maybe it's a story of gentrification. Maybe it's a story of, pollution and global warming because I got incinerators in my neighborhood. Maybe there are all these kinds of themes that kind of come up just because we're telling the truth about our life here. And so I don't think there is an intentionality about it. It really is that as a Black artist, as a Black creative, these are just the themes that regularly are a part of our work because we don't have the luxury of just talking about flowers and trees and the cosmos, right? If we're going to tell our truth, if we're going to tell our lived experience, that's what comes as a part of it. And we don't shy away from it. And I don't think as artists we have to, right? I think it's really important that be a part of our story. I also think that there is sort of an overemphasis on Black folks' reliance on telling the truth. Because when you listen to art across race and nationality, this is actually something that you typically find just in general, right? When people start telling their truth, when people start really looking at society and the way systems work and the interactions that they have, these kind of things are actually pretty natural in art itself, because that's just the world that we live in. I think people sort of point the finger more at Black folks because unfortunately we often live at an intersection of all kinds of oppression and there are different disadvantages, and so we kind of see it bubble up more in artwork produced by people of color.
Yeah, I mean, even one of the most famous ones is when people say black hair is even political, right? Like just the idea of the hair that grows out of our heads, me less so, but the just existence, our existence in in the United States and around the world is political. So I'm just I find oftentimes, I think you're correct, is people talk about art and it's like, well, why is this always political? It's like being Black in America is political. Like just surviving is political. So I appreciate you lending such a powerful voice and giving this very unique, I would argue, version of what, not even a version, but just sort of in that context of poetry to these particular perspectives. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, you mute it.
Yes, I was on mute. I need my mug. That says I was on mute. Speaking of that, go to the afromall.com and you can get a mug that says you're on mute. In case you need this. Instead of giving people the hand, just give them the mug. Just sometimes you need to mute some people. But I was basically when I was so rudely interrupted by the mute button, saying that our truth of the Afro has always been to speak the good news about our community. And it seems like when others don't want us to speak the good news about ourselves, they try to manipulate how we communicate, which often leads to us being frustrated in society instead of being free. And so I think a lot of the times the poetry, or even from the arts, frees you, even if it's for a moment, and hopefully the message frees somebody else, right? And when I was listening to your poem, what was the name of that again?
I
Jay?
Talk Black.
I Talk Black. I love that. And then Jay, you said something. What was those initials you said?
AAVE, African American Vernacular English.
Yeah,
that was so that went right over my head. I had never. I straight to the Ebonics, but
yeah, most people call it Ebonics.
Yeah, but like I think people try to like academic, like weirdly, like make it very academic, which is like
so
kind of
nerdy.
the opposite.
That's the other side of Black people. Whoever says that, which is all beautiful, right? Because we're all not the same. But when you spoke that, it reminded me of the oral history before we had the internet, and before, when the only history you had was the oral history, and you would sit down in a circle, and the elders of the family would just share stories, and so you become a master storyteller, huh? In your work, because you bring them in, and then it's like gather around for this wonderful experience, and then they're there, like just leaning on every word and every syllable and every breath and every intonation and every hand movement, and that's what I get. I need to see some more poetry. I mean, even though I'm in the other side in the music business as well, but it reminds me of just a great song being written in life, because it's not a lot of great songs being written. I'm sure the poetry that you do now are beating all of these songs that are being written now. Not all of them, but I'm just saying.
There's still some good music out there.
That's a couple good records. Dr. Drake.
I love the fact that you, Lady Brion, you do the type of poetry that speaks to social issues, but you also are doing poetry as part of, it sounds like it's part of a business model as well. I mean, you've got books, you've got albums, I know you don't do it for that reason, but that's the reality of it, because you said you wanted to do this pretty much full time.
Yeah.
I heard your bio. You got a whole lot of full-time things that you are doing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that whole business model and what kind of reaction you get in the marketplace, right? Because too often, people want us to do everything for free, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in our community.
Yeah.
We don't go into the Louis Vuitton store and ask them, can they give us a discount? But we go to each other and say, can you give me some time off? Can I get a free ticket? Can I get a free book? Can I get a free album? Those are really two different questions. But tell us a little bit about how you have memorialized your work in things that people can purchase, books, and I guess album is still a word, right, y'all?
It is. It's still a word.
Still out there.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I actually was a full-time artist since 2014. So that was my full-time work for years. And the spoken word industry is not, one that a lot of people can do as full-time work. Often you find yourself in a multitude of spaces. So you might also be a teaching artist. You might also have some kind of profession in the arts and cultural world, like maybe you're a program manager for some arts nonprofit or what have you, right? Like oftentimes we find ourselves in multiple spaces because particularly for poetry, unlike the music industry, right? The amount of money you can get per gig is just very different, right? You could make far more as a backup singer than you could as a full-time full-time artist. So, but I did make a living for myself as a full-time artist since 2014. And that only shifted because I founded the Black Arts District. And then I became both an arts administrator and an arts practitioner, right? And so I have two full-time jobs essentially. And so, I think there is this assumption, right, that you're supposed to be a hobby artist. And so there should be no costs associated with the work that you produce. I just never bought into that ideology, right? I think there are many kind of occupations in the world. Being an artist is certainly one of them in many parts of the industry. And so you have to know your worth, you have to put in the work, and then you have to charge appropriately because we still need to pay our bills. And so, when I was performing, I used to always end my set by saying, come see me at my table because when you buy books and CDs, I can pay my utilities. And so that was like my little motto. So I think that we should all, especially, right, like when we're enjoying the art form, tip the artist, buy work. And really, support them, bring them out to your event. Like, can you have an artist open up your next meeting or your next rally or your next conference, what have you, right? I think it's really important. And it's really a part of the work that I'm doing at the Black Arts District too, trying to make a pathway for Baltimore City to be more culturally equitable and support particularly Black creatives in the city and help to bolster the creative economy overall so that this can be a viable city where Black artists can make a career and not have to leave and go to Atlanta or LA or New York to find, viable careers. So it's kind of what I do on both sides.
That was a mic drop. But I was thinking I pulled my pen out. I was like, so we need to do the Afro creative something. See, we're on the same page already, but we could do one big thing in Baltimore and bring creatives in the different genres together just to meet. I mean, it might be just a great meeting place and a display of the beautiful art.
Yeah.
Because everybody hates on DewMore. The whole world hates on us, but when you make it in Baltimore, you are battle tested for the world because they are going to give you the biggest boo or the biggest
a trial by fire kind of city.
I know artists like known artists who've come and been booed in Baltimore and saying, "Man, you guys have a rough crowd." But if you are able to endure your creativity. Now, some creativity is just for the shower, right? Some and just for yourself. But once you say you want it to be in the marketplace, then it's got to be on the level, right? I mean, whether it's comedy or art. I think Dr. Draper, let's work on this creative, some kind of creative something. Lady Brion, you just stay on for 2 minutes after the show and we'll talk about it. Jay, go ahead.
Before you turn to Jay, Lady Brion, some people may want to know What does a poet laureate do?
What does a poet laureate do? Yeah, so a poet laureate serves as a cultural ambassador for that municipality that they represent. So for me, it's the entire state of Maryland. But there are actually local poet laureates as well. So for example, I just did a performance with the poet laureate and the youth poet laureate of Howard County. So right, there are different poet laureates, but I represent the entire state. And so a poet laureate, again, they do ceremonious events. They might open up for elected officials. They might open up for ceremonious occasions. They might sit on certain task force or creative and arts and culture based work groups. They might, right? They are a representative and a cultural ambassador for that particular locale. And then there are also some goals that you bring as a laureate to your term, right? And so for me, one of the things that I want to do is I want to travel the state of Maryland and do performances or workshops in all of the counties. I also want to do some large event that is literary in nature, hopefully some kind of festival or conference that's bringing together literary artists from across the state for us to perform and work and connect with one another. Because I haven't seen too many versions of them in the state of Maryland. I've seen them nationally, but I haven't seen them in Maryland. So I would love to produce one, at least one during my term for the state of Maryland. And then also just personally, I want to use this time to produce new works. And so my hope is to produce 1 or 2 new books and or albums as a part of my term as well. So there are some goals that are yours, right, as the individual who holds the seat. But ultimately, as a poet laureate, you serve as a cultural ambassador for the locale that you represent.
Okay, that's wonderful. We need to get your website up on the screen as well. All right, Jay, I am punting it to you.
Okay. So I have a sort of an inside outside question for you, which is, you sit on the board of DewMore Baltimore, which on their site, they say they are there to foster civic engagement. Can you speak to what people may miss about sort of doing civic engagement via the arts? And my second part of that question is, and I'm speaking from like an outside perspective, like their thoughts on this. And then what is the sort of internal perspective? Like when Black folks hear your work and they realize what you're talking about, and it is, to your point earlier, it's not just about flowers, right? This is some real stuff. What is their reaction? So, 2-part question there.
Great questions. Fun fact, DewMore is actually merging with the Black Arts District. So
is that right?
I'm no longer just a board member, but I'm actually now running the DewMore program too, along with my team. And so I think when we talk about civic engagement, right, I think it often feels like a really lofty, big term for folks that they feel they're not invited to do, that they need permission to be involved in civic engagement, right? Oftentimes people don't know what that looks like. And so they want to go to work. They want to, go home. They, hang out with their friends, take care of their kids. But the idea of civic engagement, it's like, I'm one person. I can't change the world. I can't change my community. I can't necessarily make a difference. And they don't understand when we talk about civic engagement, there are all these small intentional activities that really go into making our communities and our world a better place, right? So if it is community cleanups, that's civic engagement. If it is, right, sitting on your school's board or your PTA and being a part of creating a culturally responsive, right, school for the students that attend. If it is, if you, are a part of your community association and you're thinking about what kind of policies and practices are in place that negatively impact people who are in your community, or maybe, right, a kid got hit by a car and you really recognize that you need a speed hump in your community. These are all acts of civic engagement. And I think people see themselves so far outside of that because they're just like, what can I do? I'm one person. And I think what is beautiful about art is it can help to inspire people on a human to human level to say, like, listen, these are the kinds of issues that we're facing. I'm going to bring these social justice topics front and center in your face. And I'm going to use art to kind of pierce through all the different things that disconnect us and show how we're unified, this is a universal experience, and how we can inspire one another to like take up the mantle and help to fix the world that we're a part of, to make it better for our children and the next generation. Like ultimately, that's the conversation that we're having. How do we give each other permission to like get engaged in the ways that make the most sense for us to make the world around us better? That's really, when we talk about civic engagement, that's what we're talking about. It's not high, it's not convoluted, it's not all these big unnecessary words that like make people scared to engage. It's really saying like, no, you have everything you need to make your community better, right? Like we are what we've been waiting for. There is no outside external party who is going to come and save us. No, it's us, right? And we are the most informed people to talk about what needs to be better, what can be fixed, and what tools are necessary to make that happen, right? And I think art is a really easy way to kind of make that message clear and to make it accessible to everybody, especially when you're empowering young people with this kind of message, or inspiring young people early on to say, no, this is your world too. And you have what you need. You have what we need to be better. And how can we use art to inspire and like share that message? So planting that seed early really helps to foster agency within these young people to really like take the mantle and get it done. So that's really what the work is.
Okay, excellent. And can you talk about sort of people's reaction? Sort of.
Oh yeah.
About.
I mean,
when we all heard that, I Talk Black poem, like you can see what our reaction is. So I'm just interested. Is like, what is that like young kids hearing it and stuff like that? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's different, right? It really depends on the person. I think some people are like, wow, that was a lot of words, and you didn't read it off paper. It's just like,
hey, that's all right too.
You memorized all that. It's so cool. I think some of it triggers like deeper conversation. So they have questions about like, well, what did you mean when you said, or how did you come to write this poem, or why? Like, what does it mean to you, and what should I be taking away from it? And I always love those spaces where we can have greater dialogue about a creative piece, because it can be a catalyst to something else, right? And I'm always interested in what are the things people took away from it. What did people hear? Because everybody hears something different. And then some people are moved to tears. Some people are like, I got to go do something today. Like this just fired me up. I'm about to call my mama. Like, so people have varying reactions, especially, for poems that may have more vulnerability or are more emotional, or poems that are really informative. Like I have a poem that talks about the prison industrial complex, and there's often a lot of questions after that, especially when I'm engaging with young people. So it really depends on the topic matter and the audience. But the hope is, I think for every spoken word poet, the hope is that at least you were moved. The way you're moved, that's up to you. But hopefully that performance, that poem moved you in some kind of way. And that's all that we can really hope for.
Right. The idea that art is there to elicit a reaction. What that reaction is does matter to you. Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
As long as it's not a boo. The artists hate that.
Long as it's not a boo. That would, woo, yeah. Different kind of movement.
That looked like you wanted to say something. We're winding down. We have our special guest, Lady Brion.
Jay asked the question, and Lady Brion answered. Okay. I was curious about young people's reaction. There's I think it's a myth that people say, oh, you know what, young people are not interested in the issues of the day. They're not interested in being activists. They're not interested in changing their communities, and they're not interested in the local or current news. What do you say to that? Because we've heard people say that.
Yeah, I think really we live in a society that really doesn't honor our youngest or our oldest of the population, right? And so I think that we kind of write them both off. And I think if you work with children, if you talk to them, I don't think this would be your perspective, because they have opinions, first of all, about everything. They have thoughts. They want to change things. They are people who believe in breaking rules that do not serve them. They believe in critiquing things that do not make sense to them, right? And so I just don't that is not my experience of young people. When I was a young person, that is not how I operated, and it's not the young people that I experienced. Also, when I think about, social movements, oftentimes they are led by young people, right? And we think about so many of the moments that we recall often when we think about Malcolm X, when we think about Martin Luther King, when we think about the Panthers, we think about they were young. They were so young when they got into this work. So it really is a myth, and is one that we really need to put to rest about, like, young people's apathy, because that's not really true. Now, maybe they need some direction and some guidance in how to channel the emotional charge that they are experiencing, whether it is anger, frustration, sadness, whatever. Maybe they need to find some way to channel it, right? Maybe they need some guidance into what might be the thing that they want to spend their time trying to change. Or maybe, right, they need some mentorship to really help to hone whatever ideas they have and root it in history and in contextualizing it, so they can understand this thing isn't happening in a vacuum, right? There's this whole lineage and context that, if you understand, it can help you to really concretize whatever thing that you want to do, whatever moves you want to make. Like, those things I think are true, and maybe they lack guidance, but they do not lack opinions. They do not lack critiques and skills and fervor. Like, they just don't. You just have to, I think, be a part of their village and helping to push them in a more intentional direction, because I mean, we've all been young before, and sometimes you just act out of all emotion, and that's it. And I think that's often what people are critiquing, but it's just not true that young people across the board don't care. That's just not been my experience.
I'm glad you bring up emotion, Lady Brion, because all artists create with emotion. Everything that they create is done with emotion. And when you were talking, Dr. Draper, about the young people and the message, throughout history, art has always, whether it was through poetry or through music, has always talked about, like, what was actually happening in the world, in politics, in our community. And Lady Brion, I don't know how old you are, but this made me think of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, some great poets, when they wrote the song "The Message." Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder if I keep from going under. You remember that, Jay?
Of course.
Broken. I'm just gonna read the first verse. Broken glass everywhere. People pissing on the stairs. They just don't care. I can't take the smell. I can't take the noise. And I got no money to move out. I guess I had no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with a baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far because a man with the tow truck just repossessed my car. So
it's poetry. That's all it is.
It was, it's just different storytelling in different formats. This is the time when you get on the box. I guess the time has gone so fast. We're having so much fun. The arts always seem fun in our community. I don't know what happened to Jay. Jay's back.
I'm back, but I'm frozen. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. You are frozen. That's a good. That's a very great picture. It's
very
like,
intently.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, it's better than being frozen like that.
Yeah.
You hate when they have your mouth open and you're frozen, but this has been a wonderful show. Thank you for sharing your art with the world. We look forward at the Afro to doing many things, because we believe that art really touches our culture and pushes us forward, and maybe even nudges us to do some things civically that we should do, and politically. One is vote. Hopefully you're going to vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm telling you not who to vote for. It begins with a T. Don't vote for. So, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But thank you for coming on today. It really touched me. I love poetry. I'm a lyrical driven guy. I mean, I listen to lyrics first in music and art, and I'm moved by great songwriting and great poetry. So again, thank you for what you do. And I thought I came up with the name, the Afro Creative Arts Conference. There it is.
Okay. All right. Look at you on the spot creating names.
Powered by by Lady Brion, while Maryland's own poetic laureate.
Thank you so much. And I thank y'all for having me. This has been amazing. Super grateful that y'all thought of me. And also, I want to quickly invite you all on October 16th. I'm having a public event as like a sort of a launch to my poet laureateship. It's going to be at Busboys and Poets in Columbia. And so we're going to have, of course, some poetry. We're going to have some folks speak. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be at 7 at Busboys and Poets, Columbia. If you want more information, it's a free event, so you honestly can just pop up.
What's the date again?
It's October 16th.
October, okay.
October 16th. So
next week.
It's next week. And so I would love for y'all or anybody listening to come out. I'll be performing. There'll be some other amazing poets from the city performing. We'll have some other poet laureates in the building as well. So please come out. Have a good time with us.
Dr. Draper, Jay, anything you want to say?
I was going to say, Lady Brion, if you can make sure that whoever handles the publicity sends something to editor@afro.com, that would be great.
I will do.
So that they would want to know about it. Let me add my thanks. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. Just always impressed and amazed by the gift that God has given you. All of us have gifts. Yours is through the spoken word, but it's more than that. It's more than that. And so praying much for you as you continue to do this, because you're on a mission. You're on a mission, and somebody's got to be there when Kamala Harris is sworn in. Right. So I mean, I'm putting that in the atmosphere. Speaking of Kamala Harris, the Afro's endorsements are out today. If no one has seen those, go to afro.com and check out the two main endorsements that we have, one for the Senate race and one for the highest office in the land, and our reason for that. But more importantly, as Impeccable said, vote. Let's get out there and vote. We can't complain if we don't, at least make an effort. But I want to thank you for what you're doing. Poet laureate, wow, that is so well deserved. But you prepared for that. I mean, a lot of times people look at what people accomplish and then they say, man, that's great. I want to do that. But you have prepared and been prepared for a time such as this. Started in the church and now you're on the world stage. And so we are proud of you. We'll do everything we can to support you. And if the spirit so moves that you write a poem about the Afro and our work over the 132 years, we'd love to have you to know about it and have you come and perform it. All right. I'm off the box.
Yeah, commission her. Send us your commission rate. We will commission a poem from Lady Brion.
I got you. Indeed.
Jay?
Even though I'm frozen, I am here.
Oh, yeah, you are frozen. I forgot you were frozen. You were so still.
I'm a very calm person. So what I will say is, again, congratulations to Lady Brion for all of her accomplishments. I think none of them should be seen as any less than, because they're all spectacular. But I do want to say your ability to take the spoken word and make it into something that is just uniquely your voice, a uniquely Black perspective, talking about some very serious things, is your superpower. It really is. And I'm so glad to have an opportunity to see your work and opportunity to talk to you about. It is clear that people aren't assuming you believe these things, but to hear you say, that the arts and poetry very specifically is the inroad in order to this activism and making a difference and things like that. And you not only, walk the walk, but you talked it as well. So that's, it's really dope to have a chance to talk to you. So thank you very much.
Thank y'all again for having me.
Absolutely. If you just tuned in, rewind. You missed some great information from Lady Brion, and share Maryland's poet laureate. Whew, I'm gonna say that. I don't think I haven't said that word in a long time. I think since college. But thank you for tuning in, and remember, call a senior. They are looking to hear from you. Don't text them unless you're sending them a picture of yourself or their grandkids or something like that. But call your peoples and say hello. they would love to hear from you. It will make not only their day, but probably their month if they haven't heard from you in that long. Again, go to afro.com, Maryland's oldest Black business and the third oldest Black business in the country. And thank you for supporting us over these years. We will bring beautiful people with beautiful superpowers like Lady Brion as often as possible. And God willing, we hope to see you soon. And go check out, if you're in the Maryland area, Columbia, Maryland, at Poets and Busboys. Busboys and Poets. October 16th. I used to be in DC. I didn't even know it was one in Columbia.
Oh yeah, they have several locations
I
now.
need to get back to Maryland, and see what's happening. All right, everybody, have a fantastic day. You hang on for a second, Lady Brion.